Two-mouse meeting. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the City of Salem and Salem Area Finance Committee for August 18th, 2025. I'm Julie Hoy, the mayor.
Paul Tigan, Ward 1. Shane Matthews, Ward 3.
Alternate Councilor Nishioka and staff. Present.
Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer.
James Wharton Hess, Budget Analyst.
Courtney Knox Bush, Chief Strategy Officer.
Gail Freeman, Bridge Manager. Bridget Esqueda, City Librarian.
Gretchen Bennett, Acting Capacity Community Services Director. Shannon Thomas, Admin Analyst.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney.
Krishna Moody, Interim City Manager.
Okay. No one online?
We have Tammy with Baker Tilly.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Okay, we need the approval of the minutes for July 21st, 2025. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from July 21st, 2025.
Second.
Second by Matthews. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are moving on then to public comment. Anyone signed up? Nothing? Okay. Action items, none. And we're on to the management update and information items. That you guys.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Tammy with Baker Tilly to start with the risk management performance update.
The performance audit update or the risk management presentation? Which one would you like first?
How about the risk management performance update first?
You got it. Okay, Josh, are you sharing that slide deck or do you need me to?
If you could, that would be great. Or if it's more convenient, we could just try to grab it real quick.
Okay, let me try to do this. Sorry. One screening today, everyone. Sorry. Okay.
One screens anymore.
Only when you're forced to. Right?
Not the easiest. Okay. One screen, no mouse. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. There are so many options on how I can present this. Very cool. Okay. Enough of me discovering that. You can see everything. There you go. Okay. So I'm pleased to present to you all the results of our risk services performance audit today. Just as a reminder, our audit objectives were to look at the cost effectiveness of the city's self-insurance risk model for risk services. We looked at the claim trends and mitigation strategies over the last 10 fiscal years for both workers' compensation and the liability programs. We also looked at litigation support practices, which really just means what are the sort of cost benefits of in-house versus external legal counsel on some of these cases. And then we also looked at the funding mechanisms for the self-insurance risk fund. So this work was conducted between March and July of this year, and then we're culminating it now with this presentation. We conducted interviews with city staff and leadership. We reviewed key documents, and we also analyzed workers' compensation and liability claims from fiscal year 2015 to 2024. And then in keeping with our other performance audits, we conducted peer benchmarking, looking at Bend, Corvallis, Eugene, Hillsborough, and Springfield. And then we conducted our best practice research as well. So in starting to talk about the workers' compensation trends, this is essentially what this graph looked like. So in the bar chart, you can see the claim dollar amounts, and then in the lime green, you see the claim cost. So you can see that there was pretty significant year-over-year variability with an overall increasing trend starting in sort of 2019 to 2023. However, in the last couple of years, you see that line start to come down starting after 2023. And that actually coincided with the city's safety manager position being established. And so it's a promising trend. The way that these claims sort of work, that data is not necessarily complete yet because someone could file a claim in this fiscal year when the injury happened in the prior fiscal year. But it's overall a very reassuring sort of trend that we're seeing that when we have someone who's really dedicated to helping improve workplace safety. We also evaluated the claim types based on the claim count and the claim costs. So that's what you're seeing here on this slide. Some of the things that sort of stood out to us as we were looking at this was particularly looking at the cancer and the post-traumatic stress disorder / stress category. So what's interesting there is that you see that cancer is less than 1% of your total claim count, but it results in about 12% of your total claim costs. Similarly, with PTSD and stress, you have about 5% of your claims coming from that category, but about 18% of your costs are related to that category. So these are two claim types that are a little bit interesting. Over the last few years, there has been Oregon state law changes as well as some case law changes that provides a presumption for these types of claims. So what that means is that essentially where the burden of proof is normally on the employee to say, look, work is the reason that I had this injury, that I have this type of claim. Well, in those two instances of cancer and PTSD, that presumption means that the burden of proof is actually on the employer rather than the employee. So these are things that are important for the city to be keeping an eye on, especially as we're looking at the increasing cost of those claims. So they're less frequent, however, they tend to be more costly. There's also sort of a minimal amount of things that the city can do to sort of reduce those things for its employees. So the way that these claims work with cancer, for example, a lot of just the things that are around individuals within the fire department in order to stay safe when entering a fire can be carcinogenic. Similarly, when you are a police officer and you are running into a situation that other people are running away from, that can certainly cause some PTSD or stress. We did talk with both the police and fire departments about these types of claims and saw. Yeah, sorry, I can't see anyone.
We have a question in the room, if that's okay.
Of course.
Tammy, this is Paul Tigan, Ward 1. And maybe you were just about to answer, so sorry if I preempted your statement. I'm curious if you know of whether these presumptions have caused an increase across other municipalities, other counties, folks within the state.
Great question. We can likely assume that that is the case. Other cities were not very keen on sharing this information with us, but anecdotally they reported that.
Yeah, I guess my thought there, I wouldn't argue against that change in law about presumption for cancer or something like that, where like I think that's the right thing to do, but it also feels like something we should be sharing with the state legislature in terms of like maybe through our lobbyist or something like that, so they understand what the cost of that is to the city and probably other organizations across the state. Not like they gift us a lot of money to cover these things, but that feels like, especially if no one else is sharing it with you, chances are they're probably not sharing that information with, say, like the League of Oregon Cities or something like that. That felt both like an important thing to change and also like not free.
Strengthens our ask for money.
Yeah, and many of your peers, you see this later on in the slide deck, but many of your peers are part of a public entity risk pool. And so I would be interested to see if anything is coming out of that risk pool where they might be doing some information sharing or lobbying around that space. But cities generally didn't want to share their specific workers' compensation data, which is completely reasonable.
Thanks, Tammy.
Absolutely. And then just the last thing that I wanted to mention on this slide is that your police and fire departments do have a lot of best practices in place to help mitigate these claims. My favorite example of this is that you have a beagle in the police department, and there is nothing like talking to someone in the police department about workers' compensation and the PTSD that employees go through, and then hear them talk about a beagle and just everyone's smile really brightens when you talk about dogs. So anyways, okay. So moving on to liability trends. I'm going to put you all away again. So just interrupt me if you do have questions. So this graph is showing you that same thing of the number of claims in the bar chart and then the liability payout in lime green. As you are all likely aware, there were a few high dollar payouts related to law enforcement liability in 2020 and 2021, which is creating quite a skew in the data. So we actually did this analysis twice, once with the data with these outliers, and then also without the outliers to understand the city's more routine liability exposure. And so this is what that graph looks like without those three high LEL claims, which is how we refer to them within the report. So you can see that there's a much closer connection between the liability claim count and then the payout dollar amount, with again an increase in 2023. Did someone have a question? So sorry.
No.
Doing that. Okay, great. So this is that same table around the claim count and the percentage here for liability claims. As you might anticipate, much of your liability claim costs are driven by general liability, auto liability, and then we had some employment practices liability insurance in there as well. So about 75% of your general liability claims are from public works, in particular coming from streets. Those are mostly related to things like trips and falls or flooding or utility line outages, things like that. And what we're seeing with that is that it just reinforces the importance of your infrastructure maintenance and making sure that you're able to respond to cracks in sidewalks and things like that in a timely manner. So kudos to Public Works for trying to keep up on its proactive maintenance schedule. That's going to be your best way to mitigate that risk. And then going on to auto liability, about 64% of your auto claims are from police. One could certainly argue that that's a hazard of that type of a job. And then the employment practices liability insurance was another high claim cost category. However, it was a small proportion of your total claim counts, and we didn't find a ton of trends that would point to sort of a recurring issue related to employment practices. But because of the dollar amount that is associated with those payouts, and just based on the interviews that we conducted, we did hear that the city is working to increase supervisory training, management training, and that may be able to help bring down the total impact of those liability claims as well.
Can I ask?
Question, Tammy?
Yes.
This is just my lack of knowledge. Can you give me an example of what an employment practice liability claim would be? Like, what would be identified under that?
Yeah, so if someone were to claim that there was discrimination in their employment with the city, that would fall under an employment practice claim. And Gail, I'm not sure if you have other examples that you might be willing to discuss, or sort of what would fall into that category.
It would be anything that an employee is either terminated, harassment, claims like that, that they feel that they were wrong due to their employment. So it's kind of a little bit of an umbrella that an employee is upset and they choose to file suit against the city. versus most of our other liability claims are non-employees. Occasionally, we do get into an auto accident with an employee, but typically general liability or not.
I think what we see in some occasions is an employee is terminated because of misconduct or something like that. They have a property right in their job because that's the way the law works. So you've got to go through steps, you've got to give them due process, and you've got to have reasonable grounds to terminate. And what we've seen in some occasions is that there hasn't been that documentation leading to progressive discipline. It's we hear a story that, oh, this guy's been a bad employee for years, but his evaluations, maybe there are 2 or 3 missing over the years or more. And those evaluations are pretty much pro forma, yeah, he's doing fine. But then, okay, this is the last straw, we're gonna terminate him, but there's no documentation of the process leading up to that made us make that decision. So you see those, and that's why some of the supervisor training and some of the practices and procedures is what we really need to work on to get our process consistent so we can support those.
Gotcha. Have we seen, and it might be in here that I missed it, but I'm not sure if the claims are broken down by that style in a graph form. So in the last yearly basis, so like in the last couple of years, have we seen that graph start to go down in those EPLI claims, or is that kind of work that's just now starting?
The work's been going on for a couple of years now, and I think we are, I don't know how the trends look, but I can tell you from anecdotally from working with the departments that we are seeing improvements in processes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I can point you to the page number in the report where that exists, if that would be helpful as well.
If you have it off the top of your head, I mean, that'll.
It doesn't live off the top of my head, but it does. So I can provide it. Let me just pull it up for 1 second.
Yeah,
Josh is
Yeah, I
looking
got it.
ahead, Tammy, and he says page 28, so you don't have to.
Amazing. Okay, page 28. Great. I will get back to my sharing. Okay, perfect. So we also looked at the city's self-insurance model to see if it was a cost-effective way of providing insurance rather than going through a commercial brokerage or the public entity risk pool. So we found that the city has saved between $2.9 and $3.1 million a year by being self-insured, which is pretty incredible. That's a huge savings. Those savings range between 18 to 58%. We also, as you can see here on the slide, compared this with how peers are insuring against workers' compensation and liability claims. Some are self-insured. Eugene is also fully self-insured, much like you all, and then others have sort of a mix or are participating in those public entity risk pools. And just anecdotally, when we were meeting with those folks that are not self-insured, people were very jealous of the city for being fully self-insured because of the amount of control that you have over managing your different claims. So it certainly appears to be a best practice. And then the last thing that we wanted to cover with you all today was about the sort of financial sustainability of the self-insurance risk fund. So just looking at how are these costs allocated across different departments. The liability rates at the city are currently allocated 60% based on the claim amounts, which are actually capped at $50,000. So for example, those outliers of the high law enforcement liability claims, the police department's not getting charged the $500,000 plus for each one of those claims. They're getting capped at $50,000 for each instance of that. 20% of those rates are based on personnel budgets, and then 20% is based on the historical auto accidents. We found that this varied a bit peer to peer, but in general, it seems that things are sort of around the same in terms of looking at payroll or FTE count. We did find that other peers did not necessarily cap their payment amounts. And so that's certainly looking at an option for you all. City of Eugene, which is also fully self-insured, is capping those amounts. They're capping them at $100,000 each for liability and for workers' compensation. And I I personally have had these conversations with city leadership, and if you were to not cap these claims, then there would essentially be almost no point in having a self-insurance risk fund where every department would essentially be self-insured if they were just paying everything out of pocket. So that's the benefit of having a capped dollar amount, and you can just evaluate that capped dollar amount over time.
Amy, can I interrupt you for a second? So can I ask about the mechanics of this? So essentially, if a liability claim comes against the Public Works Department and they're found to be liable, or the city's found to be liable through that department for $250,000, I don't even know what the thing is. The way that this works, I'm just testing my knowledge, is that $50,000 of that payment comes out of their budget for that year, and the other $200,000 comes out of the self-insurance liability pool.
No.
No.
Do you want me to answer, Tammy?
Go ahead. You used to manage it, Josh, so please.
I did. Now James did, so maybe I should let James answer. No, not quite. So basically, we have a premium amount that we're targeting to collect from departments. So say it's $2 million. I think it's more than that now, but so what we're trying to do is we're allocating that $2 million across departments based on 60% of the claims amount, 20% of personnel budgets, and 20% for autos. So like in your example, $250,000 claim, the department is going to see a $50,000 claim in their allocation, that's a pretty significant amount. We don't, like, it sounds like we have a lot of claims, but most of them are small, a couple
Right.
$1,000. So $50,000 is a big claim. You're going to see that for 3 years on a rolling average, basically until that falls off. So they're not paying anything extra. They're just getting a larger premium share for 3 years.
Okay. So the motivation there is not to create some sort of moral hazard where you can just make bad decisions and the self-insurance pool covers it, but also don't make it so penalized that they actually can't do their work.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, if you were to just show the real history, there'd be no reason, like Tammy said, to actually have it pooled at all. You would just have the department pay the claims directly. This gives some budget certainty and some rate stabilization over time, right? Because you're only getting those cap claims amount. You're not going to see, for example, if you saw $1 million claim, it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, right, Gail?
Yes.
That would just skyrocket the rate. They would pay most of the whole premium for the whole time. So it would negate the benefit of pooling the risk.
Okay. I'll just share my personal experience when I worked in the federal government. I think in order to encourage more conscientiousness about safety, those workers' comp claims were pushed down to the lowest possible level in their entirety. And I'm not sure that's the best policy. Like I like your explanation of how this lands on the city, but I would just, for the benefit of the committee to hear. But in that case, like there were cases that in my old field office, people had very specific memories like, oh, we paid for that for 5 years when Gary did that thing.
Yeah.
The name's protecting the innocent, but
I will say, so this model was built while I was at the city. I helped with its implementation. 60% is a big enough chunk that $50,000 does cause pretty significant fluctuation. It doesn't cause, the $1 million shifts. But what it does is it prompts a discussion with Public Works, streets about, hey, this is why your rate went up. Let's talk about that. It allows more management on the claim side. So it's not that direct connection, like, hey, remember that one claim and we're going to pay it for 5 years, but it does prompt a conversation.
And if you're gutting the department's budget to the extent that it can't perform its function as well as it should, it's hurting that department and making them learn, but it's also affecting council and the public and everything else.
yeah.
So you have to mitigate it.
I guess the question there though is like, is $50,000 a year a budget manager's problem? Or is it somehow goes all the way down to the dozens of people who are driving around city trucks every day who are essentially they're not creating, the whole city creates liability risk, but they're the ones who are in the best position to mitigate it through safe behavior.
Yeah.
Right, so like that sort of like $50,000 charge, is it for someone who runs a spreadsheet to fix, or is it someone who runs a truck to mitigate?
Yeah, if I may, so when Josh and his team, when they when they give the departments the target, they know when the rate is increasing on the risk side of it. So there is some indication to the departments that, okay, we probably didn't perform the way we should have been last year. But what I wanted to kind of talk about is, I know Gail and the team are working on, we talked about moving the risk into enterprise risk management, which is part of that is to be looking at all the departments and the costs that we are paying for different incidents, and also working with the departments and the staff with some initiatives to kind of on the preventive measures so that we can reduce the cost. So I know you guys are not there yet, but I know you continue to kind of work on that.
We're always continuing ways to prevent and work with everybody across the board. So that is something. And one of the things that Tammy pointed out too is we had a change in a new employee came on, which emphasizes safety much more than previous employees. And we see a downward trend. But it's always, you know, talking about auto accidents. It's always trying to think ahead and how can we prevent these injuries from happening, and always continuously working with the crews and making sure it starts with having safe vehicles. So getting fleet to make sure that we're maintaining the vehicles correctly with the winter weather coming, you know, what tires are in good condition so we're not causing accidents, things like that.
Yeah.
But it does have to be everybody across the board. There's so many different departments that are driving. So.
Right.
Yeah, just to kind of to your point, Constant, I think where we need to be is looking at the data from different departments. And if there is a pattern of some departments or the divisions going through that, then we do like a focus training. We need to be, I know we do it, but I think we need to use the data more often to be able to kind of prevent those. So that's kind of the work.
Yeah, and it's more than the $50,000 isn't what matters, it's the safety of the employees, the public that they're working around, so. I guess I'm more nerdy about this than I even expected sometimes, but after managing foresters for 7 years, I've got sort of a safety mindset, so it's just cool conversation.
Well, and so when Councilor Tiger brought it up, I kind of looked at this as more of almost like a punitive aspect of kind of for each department. And so maybe that wasn't the right way to look at it, but that's how I interpreted it. But I guess my question would be is each department obviously has a different budget, and some are smaller than others, right? A Center 50 Plus takes on a claim, $50,000 can be very drastic. Police take on a claim, they have a lot more budget to be able to spread it across. And so I guess my question would be is the fact that the 50 is that cap holistically across every department, or should these caps be different based on your budget as far as what you're able to absorb?
So I think you want to keep the rate model as pure as possible. So you want to treat everyone similarly. Otherwise, you get situations where some groups are getting more of a benefit of the risk pool than others. So you have things where you could claim that the utility is paying for police claims, you know, because they have a more healthy fiscal position, and we don't want that. So we want to treat everyone in the same way, at least. And it does cause extremely alarming emails when a small group gets a large claim.
Yeah.
And I actually don't see that as a bad thing. It's not gonna break the bank necessarily, but it has prompted a very, you know, needed conversation.
Great discussion. Okay. That was that presentation. Any other questions on the risk services performance audit that I can answer? Okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm curious from the staff, what you see as sort of next steps coming out of the performance audit. Like I read through the management replies and things like that, but are there specific takeaways that the staff are seeing from the audit? What's the value to the team's decision making?
Like, you can speak to it first.
So something that I have seen that is a little different. probably 2 years ago, we had a brainstorm to start working with police management and having a sit-down meeting with them and saying, hey, here are your workers' comp claims. Here's what's going on with them. Here's who's injured. How can we work together to prevent injuries like this, but also help this employee get back to work? And those meetings have been very, very productive, and police just loves it that we get together once a month and do it. So then that was 2 years ago. So a year ago, we said, hey, why don't we do it with fire? And we've been doing those on a quarterly basis with fire because they don't have so many. When this report came out and it said, hey, you need to start sharing more information with all of the departments, we had a very similar meeting with Public Works. And they were like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest information. Why haven't you been sharing this with us? I know more now than I ever have. And I don't think we would have done that with Public Works if Tammy didn't suggest it. So I see that as one kind of positive thing, that we were doing it with police because we had so many with police, but Public Works was very thankful. And, you know, I see Bridget here, you know, she only has a couple little injuries, but that's something that we're planning to get to her and say, hey, let's talk about these injuries. Let's talk about the short forms that come in and the near miss forms that come in, and let's try to do some preventative and just hear more from our internal customers on what we could be doing for them and build that partnership. So that is something that is high on our priority list of putting together some loss runs and graphs that when we do meet with each individual department, we could say, here is your specific information. Let's talk about where you've been. Let's talk about who's injured right now, and let's see what we could do to prevent that in the future. So
Gail, do you want to just kind of quickly talk about with the presumptive cases like with the cancer and the mental health? One is like the primary focus is to take care of employees, right? So I know the police department does a really good work and providing the help, and then Mark Fink is also being the wellness coordinator, working with the departments. I think there's significant work has been done, and we're kind of moving forward in that direction.
we are moving forward. It seems, and this is why we started meeting with police 2 years ago. It seemed like all of a sudden there was a rash of PTSD, and it was like, why? What happened? Why is there so many all of a sudden? One of the good things about the police department is they have a peer support team. And as soon as that they hear that an employee has a problem, they get involved. And a lot of times, especially police officers, they seem to want to talk to another police officer versus risk sometimes. You know, we're important to them, but sometimes they open up more because you understand, and they can talk their lingo and type of thing. And that has been very successful. And it's just building that partnership. Risk has been invited to a couple of the trainings and a couple information meetings with the peer support, which we thought, wow, we're invited to the table with them. You know, we're starting to be part of them, which we got excited about. But it you know, they say it takes a village. It takes a village that our police and fire folks, they are exposed to the worst day of somebody's life. And they are exposed to things that we're not typically exposed to. And we do need to give them all the support and tools that they need to get back to work and back to their families. That's an important thing too. Almost equally as important as getting back to work is getting back to their families, I think. So risk is doing their part, police is doing their part, wellness is an important thing, but I think it's all the tools together. We're also even who they go see, the doctor support and what type of doctors, trying to get that information to them to get the help up front is important.
And the fire department has changed their policy, I think 2 or 3 years ago, to do frequent screening for cancer with the firefighters, and that has helped us quite a bit. A lot of early diagnosis and
early diagnostic and they're even concerned with the fire stations themselves. We just recently went through a whole bunch of testing to make sure that they weren't having any exposures at the stations and they all came up clean, which was great. A few little minor suggestions on better housekeeping and stuff, but really just trying to take everything, like what can we do to make sure that our employees are gonna be healthy.
Those are great examples. Thanks for sharing.
And just before we close it, Gail and her team, like 6 of you, right? Or 5?
There's 5 of us.
5 of them. If you get to kind of watch them at their house at 295, it's a great team and they're so passionate about wanting to, maintain the cost of operations as low as possible. It's a lot of preventive, work that they do with the department. So I appreciate your leadership.
I am definitely blessed with a very good team right now. Everybody really works very well together. And we enjoy working together and having each other's backs and being there for the employees. That's what we're really doing this for. So. Thank you.
Great.
Sorry,
All
sorry,
right.
you just made that real. You made this risk thing real by talking about the people, so thank you.
It's all about our employees are our biggest asset to the company or to the city. Everything we need our employees. That's all about.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Great. I will transition us to talking about the performance audit update, to talk about some other very important groups as well. Okay, so this is a really quick update because we're really just providing you all with an update on timing. So we are just getting started on the library performance audit. We had our kickoff call last week and are in the process of getting that work going. And then we had a little bit of a shift in terms of what we had anticipated in terms of timing for parks and then the fire performance audit, the fire overtime performance audit. So we shifted parks up, and the intention behind that is to be able to conduct some additional community outreach after the performance audit is done to understand what is the community really expecting out of library and parks before you get into your budget season. So that's the intention of moving the parks performance audit up. That does also give us the time to be able to have additional data incorporated into that fire overtime analysis, which we understand was a priority of the committee. And then early next year, we'll come to you and talk about the last performance audit and what you want to do for that study. Any questions on this?
Looks like no.
Makes sense.
Okay, perfect. All right, then I will turn it back to Josh.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm gonna transition to talk about investments.
Investment.
Thank you.
He's about to start.
That fruit company?
So just real quickly, I thought I'd start with a little bit of where it comes from. So the Kansas City Council Policy C7 is governed by ORS 294. And just so you know, so when we make adjustments to this policy, we actually have to take it to the state to get their concurrence, their comments on it. We might make some adjustments. So it's not really just in a vacuum or even with the city. The state also reviews those. They limit the types of investments, the credit ratings, and making sure we're also have some diversification. So the number one goal is safety, liquidity, and yield. So we really want to make sure we're not losing funds. All investments might go the wrong direction sometimes. We really want to prioritize making sure we don't lose funds. If we do get investment earnings, that's a bonus. We also want to make sure we have enough liquid funds to satisfy city obligations when needed. And just so you know, logistically how that works is we have a couple different things we invest in. And then like the local government investment pool has a maximum that we keep in that pool. We also have our corporate holdings and then treasury bonds. So then what we do is we make sure that we maintain a specific balance in our bank accounts to actually satisfy checks we write. And that's managed with our treasury group. Unfortunately, our treasury supervisor is unable to attend. So if you have really specific questions, we might have to come back with more information. We also do engage an investment advisor, PFM. So a lot of times what happens is we have an investment coming mature, like a treasury bond. Say it's $5 million. We don't need the funds. We don't need to put it in LGIP or in the bank. So we'll ask for an investment option. They'll give us a few options to pick from that are within our credit rating criteria and our, the holding length that we're looking for. One other thing that we added in 2022 was incorporating ESG, so environmental, social, and governance investment parameters and scoring criteria. Which was new. So even when we took it to like the short-term investment board of the state, it was pretty new. They hadn't seen many of those. For us, it doesn't, at this point, it didn't change what we invested in significantly. It does prohibit fossil fuel investments. So there was one investment we had with Chevron that we had to divest and reinvest somewhere else. But overall, even the investments we held at that time were all within our criteria for ESG. We have a long-term portfolio. So like if you're talking to the Water Wastewater Task Force, or we're looking at fund balance policy guidelines. So like the utility is always going to have $40 million in the bank. We're going to hold that. We're going to invest it out a long ways just to make sure we can maximize the return. Short-term portfolio, really talking about liquidity for payroll and supplier payments. So we're going to make that fairly liquid and easy to access. And then for bonds, those have to be held in a separate portfolio, separate accounts. So the community improvement, safety and livability bond. We meet with project managers with Public Works, and we've, when we issued the $100 million, we looked at the project schedule to lay out, okay, when do you need access to the funds, and we invested accordingly, really to maximize the returns we could have for the bond funds. There are limits. You hit a certain limit in the IRS, you actually have to arbitrage back to the IRS. I don't see that as a bad thing.
If you make too much money
If you make
on
too
your
much
bonds.
money. So I think that it puts us in a better position if we have to give a little bit back. And we have a consultant that does those calculations annually.
Josh, are you going to show some of the charts from the report that you had sent in there? Because I have just a question about that short-term portfolio. I think you just answered it, but.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, just in terms of when you look at, if people are following along, it's page 27 in the report and 96 in the agenda packet. It looks like this one.
Accrual basis earnings.
Yeah, and I'm just, when you said it, a lot of the bond investing goes into this short-term portfolio, that seemed to maybe point to the explanation of why it looks like it's increasing so much starting in 2022.
Yeah, so the bond portfolio is actually a separate account. So the short-term portfolio is all the balance of the city's funds are grouped together in a common fund, but the bonds are separate. So this is just the short-term portfolio, not bond funds.
Is there an explanation why it goes from 4 million to 8 to 10 to 12 in like a 3-year period?
So, I mean, it's a really good question. I'd have to ask them. I think perhaps at that point we transitioned how we did the investments. It wasn't in my portfolio. I wasn't in charge of it, when this chart started.
Okay. I mean, because both of them, the long-term one and the short-term one, and maybe it's just like we are operating under a different scenario than we were in 2015 in terms of the availability of funds to invest.
So there was quite a period, pre-recession where, we really weren't earning much investment earnings at all. Like
Yeah.
we were looking for places just to hold funds, where they wouldn't lose value. So that could be some of what you're seeing there.
Okay,
But I'd have to talk to our investment advisor and also some people who've been here a little bit longer than me, to see.
It's correspond with our.
No, I mean, that, this predates our. Yeah, good question. I'll have to get back to you.
I mean, there's a part of me that likes it when the Public Works comes and says they need $8 million in a short amount of time in order to fix our water system. I'm assuming this is where the money's coming from to get that done.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I don't question, I just like question how it comes about more than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Just taking a look at our credit quality distribution, I think this is really important to point out. We're not investing in anything risky. Everything meets policy compliance for credit quality. Some collateral is bank deposits that actually is liquid dollars in the bank. LGIP, the local government investment pool. It operates more like a bank. We can get same day withdrawals from it if we needed to. It does, it has a decent return, at least at this point, for interest earnings. And there's no credit quality needed. There's no risk. It doesn't go down. So the state treasury manages that fund, and basically they set the investment earnings. Dollar amounts, I think this is always important to know, like, when you're talking about our holdings, how much dollars you're talking about. So like US Treasuries, we have a significant $226 million invested in US Treasuries, federal agencies, corporate notes, the LGIP, and then in the bank, just over 54 million. So, and you'll see some fluctuation depending on the quarter. So, because sometimes what we do is as things come to maturity, we build up to like debt service payments that happen in December and June. So you'll see some fluctuation here.
So with like, because I'm just looking here that about 81% of our. This is saying 49, so I'm not sure, but whatever amount, it's obviously our largest thing is in US Treasuries. Is that a compliance number that we're hitting, or is that a number that we've just determined that's kind of our strategy?
So we have some flexibility, so we could technically just say, hey, 100% of everything outside of the bank and LGIP could be in US Treasuries. We could do that within the debt policy, basically, our investment policy. It just depends on the interest earned. So a lot of times what happens is we look at, we're looking for a 3-year investment. Here's what a treasury is earning. Hey, that's the safest place to put this for now. So there's no compliance issue. We could shift more over there, or depending on the situation, if US Treasuries are down, we might shift more into corporate notes, things like that.
I have a very practical question.
Yes, ma'am.
Who does the shifting?
Yeah, so we, our investment advisor helps us with that. We also have a couple different banks involved, but they manage all the transfers.
Thanks.
We had a request for just the sector distribution. Sorry, you can't see that up there. For US Treasury, federal agency, and corporate for a 1-year annualized return, then a 3-year return. So clearly in the near term, we've seen better interest rates than in the 3-year return. But this was kind of interesting to ask for. They actually hadn't ever presented that in our investment report, but they were able to pull it pretty easily.
So I may be misunderstanding what this means. So like on the corporate, a corporate would obviously be like a stock, right? And so is that saying that on the money that we've invested with the corporate stocks, we've only, our return on it in 1 year was 4.87%?
An annualized return, yeah, that's correct.
Does that seem low comparative to like what an S&P or anything like that would be?
It really depends. So we don't try to match the S&P, so we don't try to match an index necessarily. So we are somewhat limited by who we can invest with, just with the credit rating, the credit quality, and the distribution. So, I mean, close to 5% is pretty good compared to like the US Treasury side, at least, but you're right, it's not 7, 8, 9, 10%. But it's also not negative 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I guess I had read in an earlier slide that that's not corporate stocks, they're corporate, isn't it a corporate bond, like they issue
Corporate
a,
holdings, yeah.
yeah, like a bond.
They do have maturities.
So is there a benefit? Is it just because of risk? That's why we do it that way? Because like an S&P generally has, I mean, yes, obviously there are benefits that you're gonna have a reduction over a year. But historically has a much larger return than 4 or 3%. And so like historically, is this really, is there a reason that we're keeping it at this kind of extremely safe pace?
I guess, pretty risk adverse. I mean, just generally, I mean, you'll see this in municipalities. Back in the recession, so like 2008, 9, 10, 11. Some people got in pretty big trouble, just with commercial paper, things like that. Just losing quite a bit, so there's still some aversion to that. So, I mean, we're not going to go down, we're happy to have the investment earnings. But you have to get yourself pretty far out there, at least for the city, in order to get those higher returns. There was a question, I think, from Councilor Nordyke, who's not here, but the maturity distribution for treasuries in the long-term portfolio. So our holdings for 0 to 1 year, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. And this is something we evaluate fairly often. And depending on where the interest rates are at, we might try to push more out to the 3, 4, 4, 5 years. It gives a little bit more certainty of interest earnings over time. That is what I have for you today. I'm happy to also look through the actual quarterly investment report if you have any questions. If there are additional questions, the thing I can do is like our investment advisors come to the finance committee and we talk to them directly.
I mean, I'm maybe in the minority here. To me, I would rather see, like I just looked it up here, the S&P since 1957 has had an average of 10.4%, and more recently in the last since 2015, it's had a compound total return of about 13%. And so to know that finances are a problem, right? And that we're only getting about 3 to 4%, sometimes, right in that range on our corporate bonds or our corporate stocks seems low to me. I would rather see a more aggressive investment strategy with those funds in particular. I understand wanting to keep other long-term funds that we can have a better projection on. I understand that aspect, but at least with these short-term funds, to me, it makes sense to have a more robust, aggressive investment strategy, but I may be the minority. So
if I may, I think it kind of depends on, if you're going to leave the money forever, we don't need the money over a period of time. Of course, you want to go for the highest interest, but if we are going to use part of that money for whatever the other operations or other reasons, then you do want to be more conservative so that you don't lose money in that time frame. So maybe something to kind of look at, but and maybe we can just kind of explore. But that's kind of where I'm at. If it is the money you don't even touch for so many years, that makes sense what you're talking about. But if it is something that we use it makes a difference to them.
Yeah, I guess the concern I have is even if you have a chunk of funds that's more at risk like that. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched retirement here a couple months ago when the tariffs were invested. It dropped off pretty sharply and then it came back up. So it just creates challenges for even like Christian is saying, how long do you leave it in there? And then if liquidity needs mean you have to pull it and it's the wrong time, that creates a pretty significant challenge too.
Like if we needed, let's say we needed money in 2009, and if the market went down that drastically, then we would have been in problem.
So I mean, with that same thought process then, so what is our return then on our long-term investments? Because by the same strategy, what you were just saying is that then we should be investing our long-term money into index funds or other things, but I think we're getting a similar return on our long-term or less, is that right?
So, yeah, I mean, it's fairly similar. So what I can do is, we'll talk with our investment advisors, you know, run that by them, see what their thoughts are. You know, they're advising more than just us, you know, other cities, so we can get their thoughts on what other cities are doing also. Okay. Anything else that would be helpful? We're gonna switch to our favorite subject, the community services user fee study.
Third time's a charm.
You know, third time's a charm, I will say, even if you want a fourth time, it's okay. But we really, I think James did a good job kind of capturing the conversation from last time. I think we're gonna start from a different spot. And hopefully it is helpful in the conversation.
So I'm just here to answer some of those questions and hopefully provide some more data that was requested. I apologize in advance for that giant spreadsheet thing that I gave you.
Well, I can see it.
Sometimes it's a little bit overload, the analyst in me. But if we could just walk through it really quickly, on the far left is that community benefit. And I'll go into the pyramid here in a second. And then there's the sort of hierarchy of the fee, the division, the fee group and the fee. There was let's go with the study estimated cost. So that's essentially the cost of that fee. And that is very like specific. So it quite literally costs $73 about for the person to sign you up for that league for that portion of the umpire's time. It's very calculated fee. It's not a market rate or anything like that. There was also a request for some historical fees. So there is 3 columns of historical fee data there. The fees get a little weird sometimes because we've changed them year over year. So you see a lot of NAs in certain categories, and that's just because we've changed the fees or eliminated them or added them back. And then in the far columns, you're going to see the FY26 fee, the current cost recovery based on the fee study for our current fees. The next 2 fees are going to be the proposed rate and what that recovery would be. And then finally, on that very far column, you would see just the FY26 current fees versus the staff proposed fees and what that increase is, just to put it all sort of into context, what we're talking about. You're gonna see a lot of fees that are well over 100%. And especially like in the library. So they're kind of all over the place. And that's just going back to this cost recovery approach we took, which if we're over our minimum cost recovery, we did still raise the fee by 3%. And the money that is essentially gained there, especially when they're over 100%, sort of goes into Councilor Teigen, you talked about wanting to talk about this in the context of the pyramid, maybe into those community things at the bottom of the triangle. So those are things we don't provide or we don't charge fees for. So parks maintenance, library card fees, those we see as sort of the community benefit things. Your pay property taxes or you're visiting the city. Those are just things that we provide as a city. And then going up from there, we categorize youth recreation as maybe a community first benefit, then an individual benefit. Just there's a lot of externalities associated with youth being engaged in programs like that. And we set that at 35%. Again, I think this is the policy decision here, to your point last time. So this is well within your control of where these all lie and what the percentages are. But this is the proposal. In the middle there is the individual first and then the community benefit. So that's where the majority of the fees are. Parks rentals, library room rentals, Center 50 plus classes. Then at the top, mostly individual, that's adult recreation. Those are 100% cost recovery. And then at the very top are sort of services that the city probably doesn't provide, highly individual services. It's just usually a private sector function. So I hope that helps contextualize the fees and sort of how we put this together. It is color coded to the table you have here. Any questions on that before I move on?
I really appreciate that you arrange them by the by the pyramid. I think like when the rest of the council will come into the conversation, I think it will really help people. Just categorize it and just understand what the theory is behind it.
Yeah, and those percentages are sort of consistent with what other entities charge for similar services. So we did make sure that those, like 50% recovery isn't some crazy high number in that fee study when they were doing the study of other jurisdictions and what they charge. So under that, this is just saying what when we're over recovered for a fee, what that goes to. It helps offset the cost of those fee waivers that we'll talk about in a second. And then it goes back to that community benefit stuff at the bottom of the pyramid that we don't collect any revenue for, but is a community benefit. There was a question about fee waivers. So prior to 2024, this is what our fee waiver program looked like. There was 100% fee waiver available for summer parks programs and junior ranger programs. Those were utilized at a rate of about 60%, so pretty significant. And then a 20% fee waiver for contracted camps. Those were only used about 6% of the time. And then a 50% fee waiver for sports camps with 25% utilization. Moving into 2024, the Community Services Department sort of aligned the council policy around nonprofits and things like that, in addition to some of the financial strains we were having at that time, to sort of align with the fee waiver program. So you'll see just 20% fee waivers, and in the case of contracted camps, they got rid of that fee waiver.
Have we seen a reduction between 2024 and I guess now in the actual number of people that are utilizing like the summer parks program and junior ranger program? Like I can see the utilization of the grants is different, but.
Right.
Counselor Matthews, this is Gretchen. I don't think I've got good enough data to completely answer that question. I understand anecdotally in certain programs, yes, there's been a reduction, but I don't have an across the board answer.
I think it's interesting that you dropped from 60% utilization down to 15% utilization. I assume it's just indicative that people don't feel like the 20% is
enough to close the gap.
right.
There may be other noise in the numbers, and I don't know that I would rest all on the cost, because I think too, given the way we've been apprehensive about having these programs on offer, we could have created a lot of noise in the
Gotcha.
Sign up and like the city doesn't do this anymore, like that kind of.
right, and also just delaying even, like, I'm sure some families made different decisions because they couldn't be guaranteed that we would show up in that space.
Gotcha.
If you recall last year during the budget cycle, there was the talk about movies in the park and the relays and things like that. And I know park staff was sort of going back and forth on what we're offering, what we're not offering. So I'm sure that affected participation, right?
Just the delay in getting the recreation program guide. I mean, I'm sure I would want to look at the data better to account for the change.
Like, I think a good question, sorry, Shane, a good question to ask is like, in absolute dollars, what are we talking about? If in 2023, 60% of the people involved in the program got 100% fee waiver, what did that cost us? $200,000, $20,000, $2,000, like, what is it? Because I can imagine this question between what's a 50% service and what a 35% service is going to be where the community focuses when we bring this to the entirety of council. And if we're also not fully offering a full subsidy for something like parks or for these ranger programs or something like that, that's going to feel off to people. And I'm just kind of working in it in real time, but I'd kind of like to know, what are we talking about in terms of that number in real dollars?
What, and this, you guys may not know off the top of your head, but prior to 2024, was that 100% waiver program, was that the only option where you either got the 100% where you didn't get anything, or was it tiered of based on your financial circumstance where you got 20 or you got 60 or based on what you could afford?
I'm assuming, and this is an assumption, that it's not that nuanced. You know, we don't have the ability to like, hey, you're at X percent of median family income. It's more like, hey, you're either qualified or you're not. So it's on or off.
It's my guess too, but I'm not positive. Yeah.
We try not to collect financial information, so.
Yeah.
So we're hearing more information on this piece, just to put some context around really the dollar amount, the actual attendance for each of those. I think we can try to put that together.
It's my initial reaction that 20% just seems low, but I don't know. I might be wrong.
Again, like Courtney said, there could be other.
Yeah.
Factors.
Well, on one of that, if you remember, we were talking about pretty significant reductions even in 24. So this was actually one of the efforts put in place to generate additional revenue, is really altering that fee waiver program. And I apologize, we didn't do some kind of after action follow-up to see, hey, did it actually work? Did we actually generate more revenue, or did it actually generate less revenue because we had way less attendance and we don't have that data?
Gotcha.
And then, back to the recommendation, which is to forward and recommend to City Council approval of the recommended changes to community services fees by adopting a revised FY 2026.
Yeah, I think the question is whether we feel like we want to see one more round of information before we send it. Today, sorry, Madam Chair.
No,
just
you go
diving
right
in
ahead.
here. Today, yeah, I don't really have like personal, like super strong opinions about like what's a more individual than community benefit versus what's more community benefit than individual. But I feel like that's what we're gonna hear from the public about, because right now the only thing that seems to have more of a community benefit than individual is youth sports, which I totally agree with. But I think other people are gonna look at this list and be like, well, that's gonna be an interesting public conversation, I would say. I'm not against, I mean, I think it's for us to have, but so we're not gonna figure it out in the finance committee, to be honest. I think it probably just needs to be hashed out in an even bigger public forum than this.
I mean, one thing we could do is if you're at 80%, we could take it to council with your additional information. And you could have that conversation there, or you could have another opportunity to hash it out at the finance committee level too.
Is there more you would want to hear and know at this level, or would you rather just get into it with the whole group?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question I had is, did you merely, remember our conversation last time was like, okay, we put together this idea based on we're in a pinch and we need to increase revenues from our fees because we don't know whether or not the public's gonna pass this levy. We don't know what's coming down the pike. So like, I appreciate that in response to our conversation, you organized them by this way, but like, did the staff sort of have a philosophical moment and be like, well, maybe we are in a slightly safer position for the next 5 years, and we should really think about which one of these deserves to go in one bucket versus the other? Or did you just reorder them based on the bucket? I don't see any changes.
No, there aren't any changes. It is organizing around the pyramid and aligning things. So no actual changes, no philosophical difference. I think that's one thing we're looking for, is that policy direction is, are these the right cost recovery levels? One thing that really stood out to me was the waiver program as a big difference. And that wasn't even something that was really part of this recommendation, but that stood out pretty starkly as a big difference from 24 when we started entering into that big financial crisis to today when the voters said, hey, we want to fund these programs as maybe one of the big differences.
So one thing that I know we haven't internally, we have to kind of talk about it too, but Councilor, to go back to that whole philosophical conversation about where we need to be. The past few weeks, as we are talking about safety and livability more, and I talked to Lori Shaw, who's kind of focuses on drug prevention program, and then we are also kind of looking into the community violence reduction initiative. feedback that we received from the community last year when we did that. Definitely from the community, they're asking more in those preventive services, like, and some of them is to kind of the city to be able to provide more services at no cost for youth and whatever the list that is in there. So we need to be looking into, so I'm just gonna text Catherine and Courtney something, how much staff time is spent in collecting this money and what is the dollar amount, and also as we are kind of looking into those proactive services in order to reduce the dollar amount that we spend in reactive services, that is the philosophical conversation we have to have. That is the so we need to know which direction that we are going with. So maybe there is a little bit of work that needs to be done on our side to maybe to have that holistic conversation about what we are trying to achieve through this. But also part of the cost recovery is also a conversation that we need to have, and how that fits into the livability levy and the dollar amount required to run Parks and Rec, right? So I think there's a little bit more work that we need to do.
I mean, I think I'm close enough to there personally to say that I'd be okay with going to council, only because I am a proponent of, even as we kind of move into a softer, possibly softer financial situation, like I still think that cost recoveries are reasonable if it's gonna cost, especially for the mostly individual benefit things. And so I don't have as much of a concern of, targeting getting 100% of that cost recovery on these things. I'm not sure, what Councilor Pagan was talking about earlier, I think this is going to create, and this is our doing, because we were the ones that said, hey, let's break this out on a, mostly individual benefit and show us that. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I did not even think about that. Yes, this will create a lot of community conversation about why their softball league is more of a community benefit than a mostly individual benefit or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's going to create a mass amount of community conversation that this chart isn't really targeted towards this individualistic, this particular item, and it shouldn't be, just from a time standpoint. So I kind of feel like we created our own problem a little bit here, when we were trying to.
You can say it, I created the problem, that's fine.
No, I think we all agreed that it was a good idea, and now I think we made a mistake.
So one way we can handle, instead of like this, I know it has been kind of your like third time, Josh, and the one way that we can approach this is to take it to the council and have that conversation on with the rest of the council, so that you give us a direction about a policy direction on how to move forward with this, right? So and again, there are other stuff that are happening around it with the safety and livability. So I think taking this back to the council floor, instead of just kind of keep doing this at the finance committee meeting, probably would be helpful to advance it one way or the other.
I think there may be some particular fees that are illustrative of this conversation instead of the universe, which is overwhelming and creates some other questions, unintended questions. I wonder if we might peg 2 or 3 different types of fees, or one that's emblematic of this particular category on the pyramid, and track that through the various options for how to impact the fee.
Yeah, and certainly how you communicated about it with the city. I mean, I think the spreadsheet is that, people of course can look at the spreadsheet, but to talk about a couple examples. I think the other part too is that, to your point, Krishna, the idea of, well, the reason we charge 50% is because when people ask, we give it away for free when it's a real community benefit to the fee waiver program. I think to me, that's also a part of communicating the strength of it, is that, no one's turned away, or whatever the right way to couch it is that you are creating that sort of proactive engagement, community engagement, that sort of thing through the program too. I think that if we show people a thing that's mostly cost recovery and we're not doing fee waivers and like, it's just. It does feel like, and it will seem like. Not much of a, like, thank you for your support of the levy. They're gonna look at it and be like, oh, they're getting us both coming and going. And I think that's gonna be a hard pill to swallow.
And I would say to that, that's why I'm really interested in seeing the waivers and what our options are with that. And I get the complexity of figuring out some way to make it. More tiered would be more challenging, and so I don't know if it's practical, but to me, that's to me kind of the answer of yes, we are going to have this be a cost recovery thing. Unless you truly cannot afford it, the goal is not to hold you back from having community service. And so I'm not opposed to that sort of strategy, but I don't like the strategy of it's either all or nothing either, where it's either you get 100% of the waiver or you get no waiver. But I don't know, I don't know what the right answer is because I don't understand, I guess, personally, how much more staff time a tiered system would take. And so I think that's my takeaway from it, because I'm not clear on how much more staff time we're actually talking to have a tiered system, because to me, that's the answer to going after the cost recovery.
I think administratively it can be really challenging. I mean, we could try to brainstorm a couple options, but it's not, like even with our utility discount, it's not something that we actually manage, we contract with others to qualify them and let us know. Because we don't want to be in that business of collecting that information and determining, hey, you get a 50%, you get a 70, and you get 100.
Right.
I could see that being really problematic for, especially like the scale of the programs, like it's probably overkill. So maybe it'd be better to not look at 100% waiver, but you're at like 50 or 75, but it's all or nothing, or some combination there might make more sense.
I think it's important to acknowledge the revenue that softball tournaments bring. Where that seems like a missing piece, like it's a lot, like we get people at our restaurant who are playing in the tournaments.
Well, and we see it in the TOT. I mean, it's one of Travel Salem's largest strategies is to bring these outside tournaments in because we see a revenue with the TOT funds from people staying in the hotels. So it is true that there is benefit.
How do you respond to someone if someone was to ask you like, well, this doesn't seem like cost recovery? Like, you're collecting 333% more than it costs to administer the Busch Garden. Like, that doesn't seem like cost recovery anymore. Like, did you have another name for it besides cost recovery? Because cost recovery was back at $28.
Yeah, so it's more of
$250.
more of a market rate at that point, right? So it's more like similar types of venues across the city. In some cases, we've actually gotten feedback from other venues that do charge, because our rate is extremely low. But it's putting them at risk of not having a business, so we're trying to maintain some kind of market rate, and then it's also simply supply and demand at some point, and I'm sure we could come back with some of that data too, because if you have a low rate and it sells out, that creates challenges also.
There are other variables, including the market, right? So softball tournaments, for your point, we're competing in a market with other people that are trying to attract softball, but it is top benefit and top funded. So it's a good question. What's the market in some of these things that are more market driven?
I think by using a term like cost recovery to talk about the program, you create an unrealistic expectation in the public. And so if you wanted to call it something market, cost recovery and market normalization fee or something like that, that's dumb. Don't use that term. But just like something that gets to what's actually going on, because it's not cost
Let's
recovery.
name it after Paul.
The Paul Tigan.
Yeah, the Tigan initiative.
That was signed next week. You want me out.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
I think maybe we need one more meeting.
Good.
Because only, and maybe I'm overthinking or underthinking, but this much information might be too much to consider in a meeting. So we need to narrow the field, so no pun. But I think this is fascinating to see, and I'm really glad you did the work. It's great, but I think to get to a place where we can make a decision or give direction, we need a little fine tuning. Now, what would that look like for the Tigan Initiative?
I think that's a fair point that, I mean, even I just use cost recovery because I'm just so used to the term, but some of these things are not cost recovery, they are market rate. And I again, still don't have a problem with market rate either, but I think it is fair that we do define it correctly, so.
Yeah, no misgivings.
No.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know, staff will have to tell us, do you think you have more to go on to bring us back something, or do you need even?
So I just want to point out a few.
I hate you like asking us questions for 20 minutes and then working for a month on something based on 20
Right.
minutes.
Right.
Off the cuff response, that's
So,
not great.
so I was sort of intentional, and maybe I could be more intentional about adding the word minimum to cost recovery, such that it's not saying we're just trying to cost recover, we're setting the low end of what we're trying to cost recover. I don't know if that's significant enough to sort of accomplish what you're talking about, or maybe I need to use it throughout in how we discuss it more. But I mean, I guess that's a question maybe I have for the committee, is that does that accomplish that goal? And then the other thing is, I do just want to point out, like at the very back, those new things that also coincide with the fee waivers is probably where there's the biggest shifts. Most of the other fees, with a few exceptions, are pretty marginal. I think softball is decently significant in terms of the change that's this current rate versus the new rate. But in that youth section, I think is sort of where sort of coinciding with the fee waiver program, there might be most of the discussion. So maybe if we wanted to focus in on that section, but it depends how you all feel. Suggestions.
And we knew this was a pretty extreme level of detail, but the questions that were being asked last time were at such a level that it was like, okay, well, we just need to provide you everything. Maybe that was too much. But we can certainly pull it back by category and talk about it there also.
I don't think it was too much. This is really helpful, honestly, for me,
Mhm.
to be able to process it a little bit.
I love the pyramid. Where?
I think that most people are gonna be okay with the sports leagues if there's a way for people who can't pay to play.
Yeah, great.
These are still under the market quite a bit. I can tell you because I've paid for sports leagues in the last week.
Agreed.
But, and we don't get fuller cost recovery if we say it's $376 to administer one for an individual.
So if I may, I think my recommendation would be we come back one more time at the finance committee. We bring back the context around the fee waiver. I think we can talk about the youth programs because I think they're easier to think about. And then we pick some individual items like Courtney recommended from the other areas, just as kind of benchmarks. You can see kind of the thought process there, and we'll take one more try at it. We'll also have a brainstorming session with Krishna's recommendation to see if we need to reevaluate any pieces there, so.
Can I ask a question? I guess of Mayor and Megan. I think it's fine to bring it back. I definitely, the waiver part is what I think most interested in, but I'm not necessarily looking at this and expecting reductions or differences in the fees. But are you guys feeling like staff should be reassessing the fee amounts right now? I just wanted, if that's what we're wanting, I just want to make sure we give them that direction so that they know, like, if we're looking for different fees.
Personally, I just realized when Councillor Tigan made the remark about the 376. That's dollars, right? Per person.
Which one are you looking at?
That's how,
Under youth recreation,
that's the estimated cost to the city, and we're charging 70 and suggest bumping to 131.
yeah. Well,
So it'd still be about 33% or so of what it actually costs the city to.
James, is that the Pop Warner football thing in particular, where you get a jersey? That is
It's just sports league, so you know, the kids sports league.
May I ask a question? Of course. I'm curious, so I think, James, that you worked on this. Was this, any of these fees reviewed or looked at by each of the departments?
Yeah, they were very involved throughout the process.
Okay,
I don't think
that's-
it was involved. in any
Okay,
other-
so that, and the fee increases were based on things that you felt or the departments felt were necessary? Or was it, or I guess I'm just trying to understand the direction they were given in the sense of, because if this came to council, I could see us all picking out one and saying, I don't think we pick this number, I think we pick another number. And so I'm just wondering as to what I think the rest of you are saying, is that there might be directions, policy directions based on the different departments or if they're subdivided within that department, like library, fees for this kind of thing and fees for that. And make sure that they feel that that's a balanced approach. Because again, as Councillor Tygart said, I would really hate to go back to the community and say, well, thank you very much for the levy, but now we're gonna raise these fees and those are the fees we know you're gonna be using the most. It feels disingenuous to people that we're supporting. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out to craft a way to have council look at this, that we're not then nitpicking at each individual fee and more about a policy within each of the department if that's necessary.
Or the principles by which you're approaching the.
Thank you.
idea.
That's even a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So
And there's a lot of themes that you're discussing today that you could articulate as the broader intent.
So I know it's been a little while ago, but that's a little bit where we started.
bringing it back.
And I think it really goes back to those percentages in the pyramid, right? So that was the base level consistency we tried to apply to the fees. And then that first meeting, we listed out, hey, this is where departments disagreed and made a different recommendation based on their context, their expertise. So we would certainly, even when it goes to council, we'd want to call out, hey, this wasn't part of the fee study recommendation, but it was based on staff's recommendation as something different. And those are for particular reasons that they've articulated. But that certainly is a level I think would be helpful at council is, hey, here's the policy direction that's rolled into the rest of the fees. We could certainly link to whatever and they could see them. But one thing I've been challenged with and being involved in the fee schedule for lots of years is it's really inconsistent. So this is one way that we're trying to bring consistency to it. We're still gonna have the dozen one-offs that are a little bit different. But it does create that standard. So when you're considering policy direction, I really recommend you look at those percentages, those standards as, hey, this is where we want to change the policy direction. And that would roll into all the fees. So I think we'll bring back the fee waiver context. We'll also have some context just around that policy direction, so you could see kind of in real time what it might happen if you shift that. We'll try to have some magnitude so you could see the differences. Like if you were to put it, 40% instead of 50, what the impact would be.
Okay, no pun, but I have a bit of a left field question. Do we look at rental rates in other cities?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. Thank you.
in other cities, I mean, that's what the best practice is to kind of have that policy direction and then you just adjust fees accordingly. So then next year, as staff costs go up, you just roll that increase into the fees to maintain that cost recovery level, which is probably the best word for it in some cases.
Anything else? So do you need just a go for it from us, or do you want to vote?
We're good, we'll come back.
And we'll meet again next month or
Yeah,
June.
next month is.
All right, anything else? We're not looking at the agenda. Are we done?
So we're good.
We're good? Okay, we're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.